Hello and welcome to our Strasz Assessment Systems podcast, Beyond the Test Strasz Talks. I'm really excited to share this episode with you as we talk about just some of the considerations with new certification programs. We've seen a plethora of new credentials being issued by various organizations, particularly over the last year. And I'm really pleased to be joined by Amy Grand from BCEN, the Board of Certification for Emergency Nursing, who indeed has been through one of these experiences very recently and is kind enough to share some of her experience and lessons learned. Amy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Rory, for having me. I'm excited to talk with you today.
So, Amy, tell the audience just a little bit about who you are, your role, and BCEN.
So I am the Director of Certification and Accreditation at BCEN. Like you said, the Board of Certification for Emergency Nursing. I have been there almost 10 years. In November, we offer 6 voluntary certification exams for nurses who work across the emergency spectrum. And our newest program, which we'll talk about, is the Certified Burn Registered Nurse Credential.
Fantastic. And congratulations on getting to, almost to that 10-year mark, Amy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can you share just, I always start the podcast with this because, I think inherently it's interesting to hear about all of our journeys into the wild, woolly world of testing. So what has your journey been, and what brought you to the certification industry?
I'm a nurse by degree. I have a bachelor's degree in nursing, a master's degree in nursing. I worked for 5-7 years as a critical care nurse, and it was wonderful. Some of the best years of my life. I moved to Chicago after graduate school, worked in as advanced practice nurse, and unfortunately I got burned out very, very quickly. And so I was looking for a new opportunity in Chicago. Sometimes when you have a master's degree, you are overqualified for a lot of jobs. And I really stumbled into testing. It was not something I was looking for. I didn't even know this world existed. And I landed at a company working as a content developer for the nursing licensure exam. And I was there for about 11 years before I came to BCEN. And that is really where I learned about item development, exam development, all of the steps from A to Z. In this particular case, it was a licensure exam, and I never ever knew that any of this existed. You assume that you take a certification exam, a licensure exam, someone writes the questions, you take the test, and the journey's done. So as I mentioned, I really did stumble into this field of licensure and certification. And now it's really where my heart is.
Well, I love to hear that, and I know you've certainly made your mark here on in the industry with your work. And as I mentioned in the introduction, a number of organizations have been looking at creating new credentials. As a result of new specializations that are evolving in our workspace, or to address new skill sets that are increasingly becoming the currency of the labor force. Of course, BCEN is no exception, and you mentioned the recent rollout of the certification for burn nurses. Tell me a little bit about how this credential came to be. What feedback did you all hear from your stakeholders that led to the journey for the certification?
Our discussion actually started probably over 5 years ago, right? I always like to talk about it takes about 2 to 2.5 years from maybe the initial discussions and inception of an exam until, things go live. The American Burn Association is our strategic partner, and within their organization, they had been discussing the need for a certification for their nurses as far back as 2017, I believed, because nothing existed. In their world, there's a certification for burn therapists, but nothing for nurses. They had done their own kind of needs assessment in 2018. And again, just reaffirmed that a credential was wanted. So we were actually approached in around 2019 to begin discussions with the American Burn Association in developing this credential. And interestingly enough, the American Nurses Association did not recognize burn nursing as a nursing specialty until August of 2020, which I had no idea. I just assumed that it was recognized as a specialty. And so that recognition was really instrumental in pushing the development of this credential forward. Scope and standards of burn nursing practice was developed in 2020. We conducted a needs assessment in the summer of 2021, and that was very positive. And it was at that time our board approved moving forward with developing this credential.
Well, I also love hearing that this was done in partnership with another organization, because I think that's also something that we see increasingly now as more and more disciplines are coming together with certain specialties. I'll be curious to hear when we get to talking about maybe lessons learned, how that partnership has continued to function as you've rolled out. But before we get there, we all know that the adage of if you build it, they will come doesn't work, or generally doesn't work. One of the critical aspects of new certifications is creating buzz and getting accepted by practitioners as well as employers. Can you share about really what worked and what didn't maybe work for BCEN as you look to create demand and ultimately build acceptance for the new certification?
I think what was special almost with the CBRN exam is that the want for the credential among burn nurses was already there. It had been there for years before we even had discussions about developing the credential. So we didn't have to create a buzz because the buzz already existed. And so that's why I think this credential is so special. We did have a very good partnership in the beginning, like you mentioned, how important it is with the American Burn Association. And we were able to take the development of this exam to the American Burn Association conference even before our beta testing began. That conference is an international conference. It has over 2,000 attendees with nurses, burn physicians, burn surgeons, burn therapists, anybody who works with burn patients. And we were able to present BCEN to this community, and that was extremely beneficial for us, and we've continued to do that since. But I really want to stress that the buzz and the excitement was there, right? The community was they were just waiting for somebody to take on what may have seemed like an insurmountable task of creating this exam for them.
So, Amy, I know one of the other challenges, particularly when you get, one of these new specialties, is certainly the lack of existing credential holders. Pre-built volunteer pool. So, both as BCEN and perhaps also with the Burn Association, how did you approach building the new certification and identifying those volunteers to really put this together?
That was very challenging, Rory. But as you mentioned, having a strategic partner, membership organization, what have you, I think is really crucial to having a successful new certification program. And so we did rely heavily on the American Burn Association and their membership of nurses. Again, it's anyone who works in the burn community can belong to the American Burn Association, but our communications, recruitment for subject matter experts for all parts of the exam development process, BCN had built those communications, and the American Burn Association had sent out our communications on our behalf to their nurses who became our subject matter experts. And we had an overwhelming number of applicants, for a rule delineation study, for item writing, for standard setting. And again, as I mentioned previously, the want and the need and the excitement for this new credential has existed for so long that we were very fortunate that we did not have a lack of SME participation.
Well,
But
yes, very lucky in that regard.
yes,
Go
but
ahead.
but as you mentioned, we did rely heavily, almost exclusively, a few years ago on the membership organization to help us find volunteers since, like you said, we don't have anybody in our database that could be a subject matter expert for this particular specialty.
Hmm. No, it makes sense, and again, I think that just reinforces that value of partnership
Of course.
that other associations would certainly be advised to seize upon and take up as they think about new programs.
Yes. Yes.
Um, Well, similarly, how did you all approach the pilot and getting feedback from stakeholders on, well, not only the concept for the certification, but also, of course, the initial examination and process?
One thing that was really instrumental, I think, in the success of our development and launch of the certification was that we had built out a timeline. It's almost like a 2-year timeline that delineated all the activities on BCN side, our test development, test delivery partner side. We added dates to it. We kind of started at the end, had an idea of when we wanted this exam to be ready for full scale testing, kind of worked our way backwards. So we knew approximately when we wanted to pilot test the exam. But I really can't stress how having a timeline of events is really helpful in keeping everybody on track. Um, we we did publicize when we were going to when the date for pilot testing or beta testing, as we said, for our exam was going to be. Um, One of the things that we found is, yes, there was a lot of excitement. Again, as I mentioned, the want and the need for the credential was there. But I don't think we anticipated the bandwidth that it would take. And we had some technical issues, which I'm sure you've heard probably happens more often than not. with people not being able to register for the beta exam. It's almost like your site gets overwhelmed. So we did have some issues there, but we BCN is very good at communication, and so we communicated all the steps in sort of our process for development of this exam, and that included when the beta testing was going to be, and all the dates and details leading up to that.
Well, that definitely helps, and certainly, especially with an audience that was this enthused, I'm sure gave a lot of clarity to folks as they as you dealt with this pent up demand in essence.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think especially hearing about the nature of your audience, this next question is even more apropos because also my experience in a lot of these areas where you have pent up demand is you also have experts in there who are have a decent degree of fear of failure. And so one of the challenges with the new certification program is in that area of prep. People are not as, they don't have as many resources potentially to draw on. They certainly don't have others' experiences that they can share. So how did you deal with that challenge of preparatory materials, prep documentation, practice tests, what have you, in order to help get the candidates ready?
That's a really good question. And BCN has a Learn platform where we offer continuing education courses, practice exam courses, anything else related to professional development. And so when we started working on developing the credential, simultaneously, we started working on a practice exam. And they did not launch at the same time. The practice exam was behind, but BCN internally started working on that. But like you mentioned, the American Burn Association, they did not have any resources for exam prep, exam review. There really is nothing out there. And I think that once we were able to publish the content outline, then things got moving in the industry, and the American Burn Association was able to work on a review course, review materials. In August 2023, there was essentially a core curriculum for burn nursing text that had been in the works, but was finally published. But that is a pain point that we did hear a lot. Well, okay, I have this outline, but I don't know what I'm supposed to use to study, right? And so that holds people back from taking the exam because there isn't anything, and we tried to communicate that this is just the nature of starting a new program, that those prep materials, exam review courses, webinars, whatnot, that's going to follow. You just can't have that, right? Up front. So we did hear that frequently. Our practice exam was available maybe a month before we launched full-scale testing. There wasn't anything for pilot testing, which was done in the summer of 2023, but it was available before full-scale testing. And that full-scale testing was almost a year and a half ago, and there still aren't that many resources out there. The American Burn Association is working very hard, but it's going to take a while.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, those are not obstacles
Yes.
overcome in a day, to say the least.
Yes. Yes.
And in terms of individuals who continue to kind of bring that point up to you, it sounds like the approach of that transparency element, good communication, and also certainly pointing them to the materials that are out there has been successful, or how has that continued kind of communication track gone?
I can't stress enough the importance of communication. And if you think if you've communicated enough, you haven't communicated enough. Right? You know what I'm saying? And so
Absolutely.
you have a separate, web page dedicated to, your particular credential, and you've highlighted milestones, and you've sent out reminders, and things that are coming down the pipeline, but it still isn't enough. People still want to know more, or they don't understand sometimes what you've communicated. I think we've gotten better over time, but communicating initially, and I mean, you never stop communicating with your credential your
Of course.
candidates, and your credential holders. Um, it's just kind of ingrained in your business that this is something that you need to do for forever. But again, when you think you've communicated enough, you really haven't.
Hmm. Well, I think that's it's a great takeaway point, to say the least.
Right.
Um, well, as you look back, now that the project is largely in the rearview mirror, really, what were some of the organization's biggest lessons learned from this process?
Um, I think again, communication. We thought our communications were clear, they were easy to understand. We thought we had anticipated any questions that we may get asked, and we didn't. Right? So communicating, over communicating, I think you have to be prepared to make mistakes, which is hard for organizations to do, and hard for individuals who are involved in that creation of an exam. I mentioned there were technical difficulties when we launched registration for the beta exam, not anticipating difficulties, with the server. So I think, again, anticipating that mistakes are going to be made. I think posting or making the content of the exam available for the public as soon as you can. Like I said, once our content outline was finalized, approved, we posted it on our website for public view. That was about 6 months before we even opened up beta testing.
Hmm.
I thought that was a goal of mine, is to be able to communicate that information. But the sooner you can give people something to work with, something to use to prepare, I think the better. One other thing is, and I know we didn't really talk about this too much, was with beta testing and results of beta testing, and how you again communicate that you're not going to get a score right after you take your beta test.
Of course.
And we indicated you may need to wait 8 to 10 weeks right before you receive your score. That was not well received. People don't understand why. You get calls a week after I take the exam. Why don't I have my score? So I think that's just one little area where we could have done a better job of communicating exactly what's involved with beta testing, and scoring those exams.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's a great takeaway as well, because, particularly amongst that kind of group that is ready and rearing to go, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that anxiety about the how they did, I'm sure, is incredibly high. Actually, I
Yes.
can attest to that personally, having
Yes.
been in a beta for a
Yeah.
certification. Well, as we close, Amy, I think, what are the things that you would definitely do again, that you would highly encourage others who might be looking to launch a new certification to ensure that they do? I know you've mentioned a couple in communication and project planning, amongst others. What are some things that you would intentionally, adjust, if you will, such as that beta communication that we just discussed?
I think it's really important to have everyone within your organization on board. I think some people may think that, oh, it's not a good idea for us to go down this route. Some people think it's okay. So I think number one, trying to get your internal team on board so everyone's on the same page. Because no matter what role you serve within the organization, whether you're marketing and communications or your business operations or, content, we are all working towards the same goal. And so I think that is really important to make sure everybody kind of has the same focus. We are all going to play a role in the successful development and launch of a certification exam. So I think that that's crucial. Again, I know I talked about communication, but I think that is one of the most important things. Communicating and over communicating, and communicating in different ways, whether it's print. BCN did some marketing with some burn journals, and that I'd like to think that that could also contributed to the success of the exam. Um, an international burn journal, so we were able to spread the word. The burn nursing community, I guess burn community in general, they have a very strong international presence. And so different avenues of communication. Not everyone reads their email. Not everyone goes to the website. Not everyone's on Facebook these days. So pursuing all different means of communication is really important, as well. So I think those would be my two biggest takeaways. And I think I was very fortunate that our process went relatively smoothly. I think it was successful. I really enjoyed the experience. This was my first time in being involved in a certification program from the ground up. It's a fun experience. Meeting the SMEs is one of the favorite parts I have of my job. And I just looked at some numbers, and as of today, we have 557 certified burn registered nurses.
Congratulations.
We launched the exam, like I mentioned, a year and 3 months ago. So I think that speaks for itself. And I also mentioned, once our program is accredited, I think definitely we'll see those numbers increase.
Well, I mean, I'll reinforce, definitely congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
And certainly best of luck in finalizing the accreditation process. We
Thank
could
you.
probably have a different podcast and
Good.
conversation about that one.
We could.
Um, but Amy, I just so appreciate you taking the time to share your experience, having been involved in multiple ground up certification builds before. I know how transformational that first one is, and actually look back on my first very fondly. So I know that is something that you're going to carry with you for the rest
Yeah.
of your career.